If you're here, then you've likely had enough, right? Enough of the all or nothing thinking, enough of the late night binges, enough of the Monday morning promises to be more on it that fall apart by Wednesday. And I get it. I know how exhausting this cycle is because I've been there too. I've had the moments alone in my car, surrounded by empty wrappers and McDonald's drive-through food. I've had the days where I desperately want to be good all day, only to have one biscuit and then proceed to have the whole packet and subsequently anything else in my sight. I've woken up with a food hangover, I've felt groggy, I've been bloated, I've felt ashamed, and I've vowed to never do it again. But as we all know, you do it again, because we only crack a couple weeks or likely a few days later. Now, raise your hand if this cycle sounds familiar to you. This was really me from when I was 10 years old, lots of people raising their hands. And like you, many women feel trapped in this cycle and are really desperate to break free from it. And it's my hope that this webinar today changes that for you in some capacity. Now, the first truth that you need to understand is this. You haven't failed diets, diets have failed you. Now, for years, you were likely fed that the solution to your weight loss is more discipline, more control, more restriction, just eat less food and move your body more. Eat as little as possible, move as much as possible, cut out sugar, cut out fats, cut out dairy, cut out carbs. Don't have this, don't eat that, once on the lips, twice on the hips. Nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. Don't even look at that cake, otherwise the calories will be transferred onto your body via osmosis. It makes you think that the only solution to ever losing weight is just to have a bit of dust, which if you're from the UK and you watch television in the early 2000s, you'll likely recommend this person from Little Britain. And shows like this are probably the reason why a lot of us are screwed up, if you have watched Fat Fighters anyway. But think about it. Where has that restrictive approach gotten you? If dieting in the way that we know worked, you wouldn't be here watching this webinar now. You wouldn't be on and off your diet every week. You wouldn't be constantly thinking about food. You wouldn't be dealing with the emotional toll that comes with not being able to stay in control around your food. So with that in mind, my goal for this webinar is pretty simple. I aim to break down why you binge, why traditional diets won't help you, and what you can do differently to start to flip the script. And I'll be sharing some science-packed strategies, practical solutions, and real-life stories to help you get off the hamster wheel. So let's get cracking, shall we? Who's ready to get into it? Now, here's something that a lot of us, myself included, can fall prey to. We have the perfect day trap. Picture the following. You have a couple bad days, so you decide that right now is the time that you're going to fix this for good. You wake up, you're motivated to eat clean. Breakfast, you have a black coffee, maybe some yogurt. Lunch, you have a salad, some chicken, but no dressing because of the calories. And by mid-afternoon, you're running on caffeine and willpower. But in a strange way, it feels good because it's not meant to be easy. But then the evening hits. You walk through the door and suddenly it's like your body has been possessed by a starving caveman. You pick at food whilst making your kids dinner. You open cupboard doors and eat anything that will satisfy you. And if James Dyson was hiring for a human model of his latest Hoover, you would probably be hired. You eating like this isn't a willpower problem. I really want to make that very clear. But it is a biological problem. You see, when you take restriction to the extreme, your body will start to fight back. Your hunger will increase, your metabolism will slow down, and it will make high energy food irresistible. Your body doesn't care about the diet plan that you are on. If you are completely over-restricting, it will think you are starving, and it will do what it can to make you eat, so it's protecting you. And when you starve it and deny it of its basic need, which is to eat food regularly, it thinks you're in danger and it will do what it can to make you eat and therefore protect you. And the worst part is that you blame yourself. You call yourself weak for cracking when you've set yourself crazy rules, and then you are more restrictive tomorrow because you feel guilty, and then the cycle continues. So with that in mind, let's talk about how not to fix overeating. The first thing is to not try to eat as little as possible. If that worked, you would be at your goal weight now already. You would have kept the weight off for good. The next thing is to stop beating yourself up after a binge. Shame doesn't stop binging, it fuels it. And then stop thinking that more rules and more restrictions are the answer. What I've found is that the more rigid we are in our approach, the more likely we are to snap. And traditional dieting fuels binging. You may have heard of this experiment before. It's pretty well known, and it was called the Minnesota starvation experiment. Now, essentially, a group of healthy men were put on a very restrictive diet of about 1,200 to 1,500 calories per day for a 12-week period, and the researchers wanted to determine the physiological effects of severe and prolonged restriction. So what would happen when people were really underfueled? And the research wanted to understand this because they wanted to develop protocols for those living through famine in Asia and parts of Europe. And the result was pretty fascinating. So men who never ever demonstrated any disordered eating patterns became absolutely obsessed with the thought of food. It was all they talked about. They read cookbooks, they fantasized about it, and they showed binge-like behaviours once the food became available to them. They practically turned into a present-day woman. I know that for a long time I very much demonstrated the behaviour that those men did. And the sad part is that these men had never worried about their weight before doing this experiment. But you, on the other hand, likely had. They had never thought their self-worth was linked to how slim they were. They had never had diet campaigns shoved in their face telling them what they should or shouldn't eat. But most of you on this call have lived through those things, and you have also put yourself through ultra-restrictive diets. So by now, hopefully I'm starting to paint the picture of how you are fighting an uphill battle. So with that in mind, I want to get really practical with this presentation and give you some solid action steps to help you on your way. So here are 3 physical causes of binge eating. In this presentation, we broke it up into the physical and emotional causes. Now, the first cause of binge eating is not eating enough. Now, a lot of you might be looking at me with this face thinking, well, Phoebe, I actually am eating too much, and that's exactly why I'm on this bloody call wanting to lose weight and fix my binge eating. But if you're not eating enough in the day, your body will make up for it later in some capacity. And it's really not a matter of if, but rather a matter of when. You see, when your body is underfueled, as I touched on previously, it doubts where it's going to get its next source of energy, and it will respond accordingly. You will become more hungry, your metabolism will slow down to conserve energy, which means you'll start fidgeting less, you might start walking less, you'll stop burning as many calories, and your brain will become obsessed with whatever your next meal will be, so your food noise will increase. And in my experience, a lot of people think that undereating is a good thing, and they try to undereat for 3 main reasons. Now, the first one is that you simply don't have time, and you are not as big of a priority as you should be. You put everyone's needs above your own, you fail to make the time to feed yourself properly. The second reason why we tend to undereat is because we're making up for whatever we did yesterday. You overdid it, so the natural reaction is to try to undo the binge by eating like a rabbit today. And finally, you are preempting a binge later on, so you do your best to bank up calories in the hopes that it's going to save you if you do end up binge eating later today. But if you haven't already guessed, it's these exact habits that are making overeating more likely. You see, when you aren't meeting your body's basic biological need of eating enough food, it will retaliate. And every single time you say to yourself, I'll eat as little as possible today, I'll cut out the bad foods, I can push through the stomach rumbles, you are increasing the likelihood of a binge later down the line. What goes up must go down. If you are undereating, you will overeat later in some capacity. Now, the other thing that exacerbates overeating is just giving yourself more rules and more restrictions to follow. You give yourself a long list of things that you can't have, and then you get surprised when the off-limits foods are all you can bloody think about. So with that in mind, I want to do an experiment right now. What I want everyone to do is close your eyes for me and don't look at the screen. Hopefully you've seen the picture that's on the screen, but right now, close your eyes. And I want you to not think about feet. Stop picturing feet, don't think about feet, don't let feet come into your mind, stop thinking about feet, don't you dare think about feet right now, keep your eyes closed and don't think about feet at all. Okay, open them. What did you think about? For most of you, you probably thought about nothing but a lovely pair of feet, right? You see, when you tell yourself you can't eat chocolate, chocolate will just be at the forefront of your mind. Now, the solution is not just to eat shitloads of chocolate. However, it is stop trying to deserve your meals. Stop spending all day trying to earn your food. Stop skipping breakfast, eating a pathetic portion of food for lunch, loading up on sugary or caffeinated drinks to get you through the day, constantly opting for the lower calorie option that doesn't satisfy you, and then causing yourself to feel out of control come the evening or weekend. Instead, do the following. Eat regularly. Your body loves predictability. And if it trusts that you will be fed regular meals, it will stop dreaming about food all the time. So when possible, eat your meals at the same time each day and you will watch your hunger start to tone itself down. The next thing is to eat enough food. Now, something that you may or may not have heard of is the hunger scale. Now, 1 is like completely ravenous and 10 is you are completely stuffed and you're not going to be able to walk. Think like Christmas Day or Thanksgiving Day full. I want all of you to start eating when you are 3 out of 4 out of 10 hungry. If you let yourself get overly hungry, like we've spoken about, there will be a massive rebound and it's going to be very hard to stop yourself from eating. Equally, if you're letting yourself get too full, then you've probably overeaten and you've taken it too far. Remember, the goal of food is to satisfy you and to give you energy. And if you finish your plate, you're leaning back in your chair, you're opening your jeans and you're thinking, fucking hell, I can't move, you've taken it too far. So eat slowly, put your knife and fork down in between meal and reflect, have I had enough? And will I have enough to keep me going for the next 2 or 3 hours? And if the answer is yes, then stop eating. You need to avoid both ends of the spectrum, being overly hungry and overly full. The next thing when it comes to plating your food is just to eat balanced meals. There is a really simple method called the plate method, and it's just to design each of your meals like this. So you want to have some form of fruit or veg, and really that's going to be about 50% of your plate. This fibre is going to keep you full. You need to have your carbohydrates because these are your source of energy, and I know that diet culture will make you think that carbs are bad. They are not. They will keep you going. And then you do need your protein because this will satiate you, it's going to rebuild your muscles, it will repair your muscles, it will prevent muscle atrophy. And then when it comes to dressings, fats, avocados, nuts, seeds, you want these with each meal, but a portioned out amount. You know, you don't just want to drizzle olive oil on everything because if your goal is fat loss, that will take your calories up. So generally, a teaspoon or a thumb size amount is great for your fats. Now, when your body trusts that food is coming, as I've touched on, your primal urges to overeat will disappear. Sure, you would lose weight at a faster rate if you ate 1200 calories per day and could stick to it, keyword being and. But if history tells you anything, then that will lead to a cycle of overeating, inconsistency where you're on and off every single bloody day, and a complete lack of adherence. It also leads to you lying is a strong word, but not being completely honest to yourself is probably the best way to phrase it, where you think you're consuming X amount, but you know that little nibbles are sneaking in. Now, ironically, by embracing the long game and giving yourself more food, you will lose weight at a quicker rate because you won't have to start and stop all the damn time. Now, the next tip, and this is going to be quite scary for a lot of you who have done a lot of the restrictive diets, is to stop banning foods from your diet, because this is going to lead to more food focus, obsession and guilt if and when you do eat the food. Giving yourself permission to have whatever it is you're craving is one of the best things you can do to satisfy that craving. We've all probably been there where you want something like a Mars bar and you have a rice cracker, or you have, I'm going to have an apple and then I'm going to pick on some nuts. And you've probably had more calories than the Mars bar itself, and then later down the line, either the next day or that evening, you go and have the Mars bar anyway. Sometimes giving yourself permission to have the food will reduce the guilt and therefore will stop the fuck it eating. There's a great experiment done this, and it was called the mac and cheese experiment, or this is what it was later called. And essentially, they exposed non-obese and obese women to mac and cheese, and they let them have as much as they want of it. And initially, in the early stage of the experiment, the participant ate a hell of a lot of mac and cheese. They were excited, it was delicious, it had been off limits, and they were like kids in a candy store. Until the novelty wore off. They got bored, it no longer felt naughty, and they didn't like the way it made their bodies feel, so they therefore stopped eating as much of it. Now, actively including a joyful meal or snack into your day is one of the best things you can do to stop binge eating. This was one of my clients who came to me with this exact issue, and I just told her to make sure that 10% of her total daily calorie budget was towards something she liked. So let's just say, for easy numbers, her calorie allowance was 2,000, that would be 200 calories per day, going to something that gives her joy. And she chose that to be a Freddo Frog, which is a small Cadbury's chocolate bar. At the start, when she joined back in July, it felt scary, it felt odd, but she was embracing it. And then fast forward to December, not only has she lost weight, but the habit is still intact and she's enjoying her food and her adherence is through the roof. It might be scary at first, but when you move away from the mindless emotional eating towards mindful and intentional eating, amazing things happen. You will enjoy every mouthful. You will stop hoovering the food down, which we all do, and you enjoy your diet more. So adherence will go up and you break the guilt and shame cycle. Now, we've spoken about the main physical cause of overeating, which is just not eating enough and letting yourself get too hungry. We've also spoken about how to fix that. Now, there are two more causes of overeating that are based on your physical body, and they are very much overlooked in the dieting industry, and a lot of diet clubs that maybe you've been to won't really address this. Now, the first one is sleep. Studies show us that getting less than the recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep will lead to more hunger, less satiety, so you're less full after eating, more cravings for energy-dense food, and lower inhibitions. So you really want to press the fuck it button. Now, a lot of you are likely menopausal, maybe you're working shift, maybe you're young mums, and you're just dealing with the stresses of day-to-day life. All of these things can make sleeping through the night very, very difficult. So me saying to you, oh, just sleep more is pretty unhelpful. But I really want you to ask yourself, am I giving myself the best chance of falling asleep tonight as possible? Are you loading up on caffeine through the day? If yes, then that's not going to help you. I know that you feel like you just need that energy hit at 2, 3, 4 p.m. and it might work. However, that is contributing to you not sleeping as well that night, and therefore you waking up feeling groggy, and therefore you turning to sugary caffeinated drinks, and therefore, the cycle continues, right? Next thing, do you need to watch that extra episode? Me and Charlotte we watched the Six Nations rugby yesterday, and then we just started watching Amanda Land, which if you're in the UK and you watch Motherland, then you'll probably know what I'm talking about, and it was brilliant, and we finished it. But that extra episode really just pushed me over the edge, and I woke up feeling really hungry and groggy today. So ask yourself, would I rather wake up feeling better tomorrow, or get the instant pleasure from this extra episode now? And then the final thing to think about is, do you have social jet lag? And what this means is, if your weekend sleep schedule and your weekday sleep schedule looks different, maybe Monday to Friday you go to bed at about 10 and you wake up at 6, and on the weekends you're going to bed much later and waking up much later, you are then spending the first part of your week catching up on that sleep and going through jet lag, which may make you a lot more tired at the start of your week, which isn't helpful. If you've answered yes to any of those questions, then I really want you to do your best to fix them and watch your cravings diminish. In terms of the ease of things to implement, just lying down and closing your eyes for a little bit longer each night will have the most amazing return on your investment. And then the other cause of overeating, the final physical cause, is dehydration. Even mild dehydration can make you feel quite hungry. It can lead to less temperature regulation, so if you're going through hot flushes, being dehydrated can make this worse. It can cause skin irritation, constipation and irritability. When I was doing some reading for this presentation, the analogy that was used about constipation was pretty grim, but it was like, imagine going down a slide without water versus with water, and that's essentially what's happening to when you go to the toilet when you're dehydrated. Anyway, let's talk about that. Now, start off with a glass of water upon waking if you're not really paying attention to how much you're drinking, and then make sure that with every single meal you have that glass of water. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it will make a big difference. Not only will you become more hydrated, but also if you're sipping in between bites, you will slow down when you're eating, you will enjoy your food more, and you will likely become a bit more full more quickly. So it can be a really good way to stop overeating. So those are the physical causes of binge eating out of the way, and hopefully you have some ideas as to why you may have been overdoing it. So now I want to talk about the other, and the most cases more destructive cause of binge eating. Now, this type of hunger causes us to overeat, and it's got nothing to do with our stomachs at all. It's the type that makes you overeat when you aren't even hungry, because food isn't just fuel, is it? It's comfort, it's escapism, it's relief. But only in the build-up to and during the binge. When you make the decision that you are going to binge, maybe you've had a stressful day and you just think, oh, you know what, sod it, I'm going to go and have the McDonald's drive-thru, I'm going to go to Krispy Kreme, I'm going to have that food. That build-up is exciting. Your heart feels like it's pumping, the adrenaline's building, you're imagining what you're going to eat. You decide what you're going to have, you plan what you will have, and you're practically drooling. You start eating, you shovel the food down, you barely even chew or taste what you are having, and then you are done, and then it hits you. And whatever feelings cause you to overeat, so maybe you're stressed, annoyed, pissed off, that is still going to be there. The food hasn't fixed that, But now you are also dealing with the physical and the physiological effects of having overeaten. So the indigestion, sweating, the heartburn, probably not going to be able to sleep well that night. And then also the emotional discomfort of just feeling guilty and why the hell have I done this again? Now, if you're constantly turning to food when you're stressed, bored, lonely or overwhelmed, it is not, and I repeat, it is not because you are weak. It's because you have been using food to meet a need that food can't fulfill. A stressful life will exacerbate overeating. Now, I want you to think about how your day pans out, and I imagine this is the case for a lot of you. You wake up exhausted, 101 things to do, you're rushing to get everything done. You spend your entire day pouring energy into work, family, other people, without taking any damn time for yourself. You practically collapse at the end of the day, and food is your only source of comfort and escapism. It's the only thing that you can look forward to. If that sounds familiar, then it's no surprise that you are overeating. Food has become your only outlet for stress and frustration. Most people try to stop overeating by focusing solely on the food. They go on another diet which does the following. It removes the one thing that is getting them through the day, one thing that's getting you through the day. So the real problem here is that your life is running you into the ground and food is the only relief that you've allowed yourself. And it feels sometimes a bit harmless, right? Because if you think about vices, like, well, at least it's not smoking, at least it's not drinking, but it can be equally as detrimental to your mental health than those other vices. I can't comment on what's the most unhealthy, but it's so destroying to your mental health. And I know this because I've been there myself. So I want to discuss about what you need to do instead. Now, before we get practical on, the strategies to handle emotional eating, I first want you to differentiate between pleasure and happiness, and also discuss why you need both. Now, a big reason why people overeat is because they have a total lack of joy in their lives. And it's horrible to say, but this was for sure my experience. But our brains crave pleasure and reward. And if you don't give it a healthy way to feel good, it will turn to food, alcohol, social media or equivalent for a quick hit. Pleasure isn't the enemy though, it is a biological need, but pleasure isn't the same as happiness. Pleasure is fleeting. It's that quick hit you get from food, alcohol, social media. Happiness is feeling fulfilled, content and satisfied with life. If you're always reaching for food to cheer you up, it's a strong sign that you're not getting happiness elsewhere. So instead of trying to stop emotional eating, I want you to focus on addition. What can you add into your current routine to meet your emotional needs? Anytime you have a sudden urge to eat, see this as your body waving a massive red flag saying something isn't right. You need to take a pause. Ask yourself, what do I actually need right now? And this pattern interrupt is so difficult. It is like a muscle. It needs to be worked. You will not get this right all the time. Sometimes it will be so mindless and it's so hard to stop yourself in the moment. But the sooner you can catch yourself, the better. Ask yourself, what do I actually need right now? Are you stressed? If so, take a break, go for a walk, have a deep breath. If you're bored, maybe you can find a new hobby, a book, call a friend, have a conversation. If you're overwhelmed, can you offload tasks to your other half? If the kids have been driving you up the wall and you just need 5 minutes to yourself, can you make your partner go and take them out of the house? Can you write a to-do list so at least you feel like you're making progress? Can you take yourselves out of the house? If you're tired, could you take a nap? Could you have a long shower, a long bath? Could you have an early night? Now, I know a lot of you will be here rolling your eyes thinking, yeah, but I'd much rather have the chocolate, that's going to make me feel better. And you're right, guys, it probably will, because I know that when I first started diving into this stuff, I rolled my eyes and thought it was woo-woo, but it really does work. None of them will give you the same instant hit that food will, but they sure as hell will give you the long-term happiness that you desperately crave. And it's one of those things, I talk about this a lot with my clients, but short-term pain over long-term gain. In that moment, it really does feel like you're missing out. Why can't I just have the food? But you are making life so much better for future you. Immediately, because that person will fall asleep and they will not wake up feeling bloated and shit about themselves. But in the long run, they'll be working towards their goal weight. And that gives you so much more pleasure than food ever will. And this isn't the whole nothing tastes as good as skinny feels, but nothing feels as good as you feeling in control around food. The answer to stopping binge eating isn't more restriction, more hunger, more punishment. It's understanding what your body needs, treating it with a bit more respect, and breaking the cycle for good. So you likely need a new way to think about food, think about your body, and think about your choices. So to wrap this up, I want to give you some low-hanging fruit tips. The first thing, and this will be scary for a lot of you because I imagine quite a lot of you have a fat loss goal and a stop binge eating goal. In my experience, it is very hard to do both at the same time. It is scary, I know, but you've likely been taught that the only way to change your eating habits and to lose weight, and that the only good outcome of this is the scales going down. But if you've constantly been trying to lose weight, make yourself smaller, and that has led you to the point where you're on a call about binge eating, how has the focus on weight loss served you? Probably hasn't done you very good, has it? Take the pressure off weight loss, and take the pressure off the scales and put it towards feeling happy and healthy. And ironically, 9 times out of 10, you will lose weight as a byproduct of this because you'll stop the crazy late night eats, you'll stop the weekend overeating. When the scales are your only form of measurement of success, you create anxiety around your food choices, and you also encourage extreme behaviours or you act differently. How many of us have had a good weigh-in and thought, great, I can just eat whatever I want to my weigh-in next week? A lot of swimming clubs do this, they did for me. Or maybe we have a bad weigh-in and we think, sod it, what's the point? I'm just going to overdo it, this isn't working. When you're constantly looking at the scales, it's very, very hard to be neutral with your eating behaviours. Now, the next thing is that there are no good or bad foods, just more nutrient dense or less nutrient dense food, more calorie dense or less calorie dense foods. As long as you are labelling your foods, the more present guilt will be if you do eat them, and as we know, guilt causes overeating. The goal is not to not eat certain foods because they are bad, it's to not eat them all the time because you wouldn't feel great. I know that I've told you to include a joyful meal into your diet, and initially it may feel like a free-for-all, but that will wear thin because when you're eating poor quality food all the time, you don't feel great, and that will be a lesson that you will learn. Aim to give yourself really good quality, nutrient-dense foods, fuel yourself well, and make sure that you are getting some pleasure from your food. But then stop overeating those foods because they don't make you feel good. The next thing to do, step 3, is to reframe your overeats. You are human, they will happen. There will be a day, maybe soon, where you do overdo it and you don't feel great about that. But instead of bullying yourself and saying, I was so bad today, why can't I do this? I'm such a shit person, I can't eat tomorrow. You need to reframe it and learn from it straight away. Why did you overeat? Were you unprepared? Did you not eat enough the day of? Were you lacking something emotionally? Were you around a certain person that triggered you? You either win or you learn, right? Don't see overeats as failure. You need to take the lessons from them. See each mistake as data and fail forwards. Step number 4 is to reset as quickly as possible. It's never the slip up that does the damage. It's not binge eating that's the problem necessarily, but rather the spiral that follows. We have the biscuit, it turns into the packet. We have a high calorie breakfast that then turns into a high calorie lunch, dinner, and then the next day we screw up on Friday. That means that we have to start again on Monday. It's the all or nothing black and white thinking that does the damage. So next time you overeat, don't punish yourself, don't cut calories, just make the next decision a good one. Go for a walk, have an early night, drink some water, be decent to yourself, plan your next meal, consume more protein so at least you feel a bit more satisfied. And if you can increase the gap between overeats, so if right now it's happening daily and you can make it happen weekly or monthly or quarterly, and if you can reduce how much you overeat by, if it used to be the whole packet and now it's 3 biscuits, then you are winning. That is the goal. So at this point, I really hope that you've started to identify your main binge eating triggers. And I hope that you've understood that you're not broken, but your approach likely has been. And you should now also have some simple strategies to follow to break the binge eating cycle for good. And a lot of you will go and you want to implement these alone and try and break the cycle for good. And if this is you, please use this webinar, use this presentation, refer back to it, listen to it as much as you need. But for others, the solution isn't going to be more knowledge, more books, more podcasts, more webinars. It's about taking action. And I'm going to be transparent. The best way to take action is to take and get some form of accountability.